Greetings.
Hello.
Welcome to The Future is Now, a Zoom communique. We're talking to you from the year 2688, and we have dialed in, as you say, from the future in order to talk to you about what life is like in your time, because you might not understand this, but 668 years from now, we're living in a glorious utopia where all of your wildest dreams have come true. And so we're here to learn about that future with you. My name is Cedar.
I am Sequoia, and we are historians from the future, from your future, in the place that you call Humboldt County, which we call the glorious utopia. That is the place that we just live and doesn't really need a name. It's the place where we live in the year 2688, what you would call 2688.
We just call it right now. And The future for you is now, because we're here talking with you about things that we saw in our studies. We were researching through the electronic files that we discovered, and we have found some amazing artifacts of the way world used to be in your time. And particularly, we are especially interested in this thing that we saw on I think you called it a web page that was called the Land Office from the Imaginal Services Bureau. And amazingly, many of those things that happened during, in that publication, which was later turned into a small book later in 2020, I don't want to give anything away, but was, those things actually came to happen in the future. And so, whoever wrote this thing is really prophetic, and we were trying to track this person down, but on the way we're learning about other folks who did some work, doing the work that led to the glorious utopia that we see before Sequoia.
Thank you. Yeah, to this glorious utopia. I mean, that's just a small chunk of what we have here, thanks to the hard work of people starting in the year 2020, the great conjuncture of 2020, when things really got bad before they really got good. But we can't talk about that too much because of the time.
We can't give you too many details. And actually what we're going to do is be talking to you all about what life is like in your year, what you call the year 2020. And in order to make you feel a little more comfortable, what I've been doing is I've been really getting into cat's play.
I think that is not what I think you mean cosplay.
Oh, right, you called it, exactly.
Yeah.
You called it cosplay. Yes, cosplay. And as you can see behind me, I have a recreation. I've recreated in its entirety the Rebel base from one of your art works of fiction. So I hope you feel that we're doing our best to make you feel comfortable with talking to people in the future. But who do we have? We actually have a guest from the year 2020 today. And so we're really excited to talk to this person and understand what work was going on in the year 2020 that made the beautiful, glorious utopia that we see 668 years later. And so Sequoia, who do we have today with us?
Today we have a representative of the Humboldt Tenants Union, which that word tenant is one that I had to really do some research about and learn what that means. But we have here from what you call Humboldt County in your year 2020, we have Tiff Laff. Welcome.
Thank you.
Tiff.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Or for visiting, or
Yeah.
whatever we're doing here.
I think that we met somewhere in the middle.
Okay, that makes sense. That sounds like it would be the easiest thing to do.
Yeah. And really, you know, we want to give a little to you as well. So we didn't want you to come all the way to the future.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. And thankfully, we have this friend, Rufus, who we met on the webpage called Reddit, in the futurology thread of Reddit. We met this person, Rufus, who's helped us to connect and to create this space where we can meet in the middle.
Okay, well, thank you, Rufus.
So,
They're a gem.
yeah, Sequoia and Rufus, maybe Rufus can show the web page that we are reviewing today, which is on the land office. Can Rufus show us that web page?
Yeah.
It's the one that's called the Landlord Recovery Center. Now, we had to do some research to understand what a landlord is, because we haven't had those for hundreds of years. Rufus, there we go. Let's show us that. This is the imagining from the land office. So this is the Landlord Recovery Center.
And so I think that I would like to ask a question here of you, Tiff, to help us to understand this concept. And I've read a little bit about landlords, and it seems, you know, that comes from a time when only certain people were allowed to have land. They were the lords of the land.
Right.
Thank you for showing us that, Rufus. We can go back to our images of our folks here so that we can see who we're talking to. Thank you.
I think we're good.
Thank you, Rufus.
So, Tiff, what is that? What is this landlord?
Yeah, so I have to say, thinking about it, landlord might be my favorite type of lord these days, because at least like they're honest about what they are. They still have lord in the name, which seems odd to us for the most part. Like, we don't call bosses wage lords, even though that's essentially what they are. But landlords are basically the people who rule over land, a house where other people called tenants are allowed to occupy at a cost, and usually a great cost, a big chunk of their income from their own labor.
So you're talking about when people make things like grow food, they need to give food to the landlord in order to get to live on the land that they're doing things for. Is the cost? Some things we don't have in the future, like money, and
right, okay.
So you maybe need to explain.
I'll do my best.
Is this a money thing?
Yeah, so that's more like how it was under feudalism for most people, where people were growing food and giving a portion of it to the lord of the land in order to earn their occupation of the land. And I guess, you know, there are still some people who labor to grow food, and that's the way that they might pay their landlord. But the way it really works is that most people have to go and work a job where they get paid, often at an hourly rate, and then they have to give some of that pay, anywhere usually between a third and a half of what they earn each month, over to the landlord so that they can have a roof over their heads.
That's really strange to us, because we understand in our time that housing is a right, and that every person has a right to have a safe and warm place to sleep. Is that not how it is in the 2020?
This is the one that I sleep in.
That's amazing.
Huh.
I think what you're talking about makes a lot more sense to me too, but we are under a system that seems to a lot of people to be very, very fixed, in which we have to give over this income that we get from our labor in order to have a place to live. It's not, even though many people recognize that it should be a right, it's really not treated that way, to the point where there are many people who aren't even able to have a roof over their head. They don't have a house.
That's something we came across too, was homelessness. Now, you had some questions about that, didn't you, Sequoia?
I do have a lot of questions about that, but before that, and before I forget, I need to ask, who decides the rate that is paid to live in the house? Is there a council that decrees that this is the worth of a certain sized unit? Who decides?
Mostly it's decided by those who control what's called the market.
We've been hearing about the market a lot.
Okay. And you could say that there are certain councils that might enact policies that, like city councils, county governments, state governments, whatever, that might enact certain policies to try to help regulate that cost. But really it comes down to landlords will charge as much money as they can possibly extract from tenants. So as much as what they say, as much as the market will bear, as long as they can find tenants to fill their units that will pay the maximum price, they will charge the maximum price that they can get away with.
So occasionally all of the renters must just say, we're not going to pay, and then those rents go down, right? Because if they don't have anybody paying rents, then they wouldn't be, then they'd have to lower them, right?
Exactly.
That does happen sometimes. It's kind of I would call it almost a lost art that is more recently being rediscovered as a way to keep roofs over our heads and keep housing affordable by gathering sort of collective power with other tenants and having some control over how much landlords are able to charge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The power of the people. I've read about this.
Yes.
I read about this on the web pages.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So tell me this, like if I was, I guess I'm not understanding, because if I was if I had children or something, and then for some reason I had to move where I lived and I didn't have a good place to live, I would just go and find a house that's vacant and go and live in it. So, I mean, you don't have to, we still don't understand. You don't have to pay to live. That doesn't make sense. But do people just go and just occupy houses and go live in them? I mean, that's what we do, right?
You're right that it doesn't make sense. There are a lot of things in place right now that prevent people from being able to just go live in vacant houses, even though there are a lot of vacant houses. In fact, more vacant houses than there are people without houses, and yet there are still people without houses because they're not allowed to be in those vacant houses, because those are considered owned by someone, as in someone has the rights to them, even if they're not occupying them, even if they're not currently making use of them.
Wow. So this is the homelessness thing that we've heard about. So Sequoia, did you have some particular questions about homelessness or?
Well, in some of the research that I have done most recently, I have learned, and I do not have the papers in front of me to the exact numbers, but as a testament to what you were just saying, that there are about 7,000 empty buildings in the place that you call Humboldt County. Mm-hmm. About half of them are not for sale. They're not for rent. They're not occasionally used. They're just absolutely vacant. That is about 3,500 of these units. But there are, by estimates that may or may not be correct, based on what I've heard is the very complex nature of trying to actually count people who do not have houses. About 1,500 of those in this place called Humboldt County.
Wait a minute. So what I'm hearing then is that there's plenty of housing. There's more than enough housing, and there's still people who are not living in those houses. So it sounds like maybe there needs to be some kind of systemic change in your time in order to further us, to get us towards this glorious utopia that we know of in the year 2688. Can you explain some of the work that you're doing in order to make this change? And we won't tell you whether or not it comes true the way you're thinking of it, but we might give you a little nod. Or so anyway, tell us about what it is that you are doing with these people. That you have a group of tenants that's called the Humble Tenants.
Yes, yeah.
Question. Sorry, I just realized that the tenants are the opposite of the landlords.
Yeah, you could put it that way.
Okay.
Within that relationship, that is true. Yes, they're counterparts. And yeah, I agree that it does sound like systemic change is needed. So Humboldt Tenants, I guess, could I just kind of go into a little of my background and kind of leading up to the creation of Humboldt Tenants? So
that sounds wonderful. We'd love to hear the story, because that's what we live in the future. We talk about stories of things, and this historical research is really tough on our brains. But
we like stories.
Cool. So, well, going way back, but not for too long. I've been a tenant now for about 20 years, and right away with my very first experience renting from a landlord, I found that I had to quickly learn what my rights were. There was really nobody to prepare me for what it means to be a tenant and all the many curveballs that would get thrown at me. And I quickly had to learn what my rights were and how to assert them. And I found I did a pretty good job. And over the years have found that I've kind of had a knack for this, and I've helped many friends over the past 20 years do things like win back their security deposits, and get habitability issues addressed, like repairs, and to stop maybe harassment that they were experiencing with their landlords, various things like that. And so I've kind of developed, even though I'm not a legal professional, I've developed a good amount of knowledge and experience in fighting for tenants' rights. And so for the past about 7 years, I've been organizing with a group called Humble Grassroots. And we're an anarchist collective here in Humboldt, which has been around for about 13 years. And for the past few years, we've been holding workshops for tenants' rights in order to kind of help tenants learn what their rights are, learn how to take preventative measures so that they don't run into trouble, figure out how to navigate the legal system. And we've done this, in part, of course, wanting to help tenants here, but also in hopes that we could gather together enough motivated people to have a tenants union, because we're seeing signs of gentrification, housing costs are rising, and we recognize that it's important to have collective power in order to have some kind of buffer from the kind of rise in costs that would eventually push us out of the area. It would make it unaffordable for us to live here. And so we've been trying to, and slowly we have been collecting people who want to be part of a tenants union here. We have some special challenges around that, it being a rural area. Things can't be organized quite the same way as they can in the city. So we're kind of learning as we go, but with this pandemic that we're experiencing right now, and so many people getting laid off from their jobs at once through no fault of their own, and very suddenly having to make impossible choices, or looking at having to make impossible choices, like choose between food and shelter. We had a very sudden burst of interest and activity with tenants wanting to come together to figure out what we could do together to protect ourselves. And so Humble Grassroots, along with some other individual tenants, started up a Facebook page, and it grew. Within the first couple of days, we were at 200 people, and it's growing more and more every day. And so right now, Humboldt Tenants is a free association of tenants and some affinity groups and various other organizations, allies. Most of the people in there are tenants, but we have some allies that are maybe homeowners. We even have some landlord allies. Just concerned people coming together, wanting to support each other, figure out strategies to help us get through this while still having all of our needs met. And so we're in Humble Tenants specifically focusing on our housing needs.
It sounds like, again, like the power to the people that I learned about on the web pages.
You got it.
Yeah, so it seems that there must be so many more of the tenants than there are the landlords. Do you think is that true?
I think that would have to be true, yes, because many landlords own more than one rental property. So you might have one landlord with multiple tenants. Sometimes you have these big corporations that have thousands upon thousands of tenants. So yeah, there's definitely got to be more tenants than landlords. Yeah.
So another thing that we do not have in the year 2688 is how you say it, the hierarchy. And so this seems like this very much fits into that. And forgive me if this is a tasteless question to ask. Were the landlords, are they just better than everybody else? And that's why they get to do this?
No. I mean, you could call it privilege, access, wealth, whatever it is. It's not because they're superior human beings. It's just a matter of their ability to access things that the rest of us can't.
And so maybe this the landlord recovery office that we've discovered on the interweb, perhaps this is the place where they can come to that realization. where you can, you know, if you're on the same level as them, you can have the communication about why it is they, you know, housing should be for everybody and why we all need places to live.
Yeah.
That is how this comes about.
I love that idea as part of the strategy, yes. However, I will say there's been a lot of things in the news lately about benevolent and kind landlords who do realize their position maybe of unfair privilege and do have sympathy for their tenants, and they have volunteered to give their tenants a break on rent while we're experiencing this health crisis. And that it's a lot of feel-good stories that I'm seeing, and that's great. I love that that's happening. But what's not making it in the news as much, but is far more prevalent, is landlords being just downright unsympathetic, cruel, and nasty to their tenants, even while understanding that their tenants have no control over their sudden lack of income. And so we certainly can't rely heavily on this idea that landlords will just have, you know, will just give us a break out of the kindness of our hearts. We can't rely on the hope that landlords will treat their tenants in a humane fashion, because really when it comes down to it, it's not a very humane relationship to begin with.
That's certainly the way it seems looking back
Mm-hmm.
in the future.
This is amazingly educational for us. You're an extremely eloquent speaker and an excellent representative of the year 2020. It seems if everyone was this together and with it and able to articulate their feelings, I don't understand why everyone's not just getting along, and landlords understanding that that if people are unhoused, they will get unhealthy and have problems, and their society will start to fall apart and collapse unless everybody gets together and works together on things. It seems like a strange thing, a strange way to achieve it's undermining security, really. I sense some fear in this accumulation, of power in your culture.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there are legitimate things to be afraid of. I think right now with this pandemic, people are legitimately in fear for their health and safety. But there's also so many forces that that perpetuate illegitimate fear and direct it at the humans next to us, rather than directing it at the system where it really, you know, would be more legitimately directed. And everyday people are being bombarded with things in the news and media that cause them to feel that it's an okay thing to do, that it's basically self-preservation for them to treat their fellow humans in an inhumane way.
Well, maybe if this I'm not sure if you've begun work on creating this landlord recovery center where landlords can be reemployed to actual productive labor rather than taking advantage of other people. But it sounds like this would be a great place where folks could learn to understand that good things come from doing work that calls to them and fulfilling their vocation as it was given to them, and it naturally inhabits within them, rather than trying to amass more property and ownership of stuff in order to feel like that they are somehow safer than other people, and therefore they're winning. So have you had any success in recovering any landlords? I guess that's the question we have for you.
You say you have some on your Facebook.
Yeah.
You have landlord allies.
We do, and those ones I really do think that they will end up being a part of the solution and not continue to be a part of the problem. I have personal friends who are otherwise reasonable and kind people who have been having a lot of trouble coming around to some of these ideas. And, honestly, I don't blame them, not immediately. Like, we've all been brainwashed. We've all been brought up in this way to think that this system and the way that we're doing things is right, legitimate, even natural. It's hard for people to imagine something beyond this. It's hard for people to understand or conceive of different types of relationships in society. And so it takes a lot of work for people to kind of disentangle their minds from this sort of brainwashing that they've undergone their whole lives. And then also, this part of this brainwashing is being told that if you do things in a particular way, and if you reach a particular point, then you should be set. That the system will reward people who do things in these ways. And so the truth is that some of these landlords, especially the ones who might only own like one rental unit, which is the case really for a lot of the landlords in Humboldt, and in many cases they did work hard for a long time, and granted, they did still get to have access that many tenants don't have the privilege of access to, like loans, and there's all sorts of things that go into it, but still, these landlords remember the many years of hard work that they put in. A lot of times people buy very dilapidated buildings for, not terribly expensive, and they put a bunch of work into fixing them up, and then they put them out on the market, rent them out to tenants. They might treat their tenants pretty well, do repairs in a timely manner, not charge, a crazy amount or whatever. And so as far as they're concerned, as far as they've been taught, as far as the system has been telling them, they've done everything right. And so now it doesn't feel fair to them that they would not be able to reap the rewards of that. And so it's going to take time. It's going to take ideological work for people to really look at the bigger picture of what these relationships are actually based on, and the inherent injustice in that.
I want to say first that in the year 2688, things are looking pretty good. So I can't tell you how long it took to get there and to undo this brainwashing that you speak of, but it happens. We're looking pretty good here. But also and perhaps this is a discussion for another day, but in your time, this concept of fairness comes up a lot, but it doesn't seem to really be applied in a fair way. That it is subjective to every single person, seems to have a different idea of what is fair. And we do a lot of research on your time, and that doesn't always mean that we understand any better what is going on.
A lot of these things are very hard to understand. Yeah.
I'm getting Rufus is telling me that he actually purchased his house from a landlord that, as part of they worked out a deal where the landlord understood that it was just fair to sell the house to the person who was living. That if you're dealing with money, I guess that makes sense. Is you just work out a way so that somebody wants to have a house, then that's how you do it, right? You just make a way for a path to ownership.
That certainly seems reasonable. It's not common, but I have heard of it happening, and I think it's one of the novel solutions and one of the ways that landlords can be an ally to tenants and enter into a more humane relationship with society, without having to be left with nothing to show for any hard work and effort that they might have put in.
So we talked a lot about the landlords working really hard. So is it that the people who don't have places to live, are they not working as hard?
They must not work as hard. That's why they're not landlords. Otherwise, they would be landlords too. That now it's making sense.
That's absolutely not the case. In fact, tenants work so hard. When they're part of the working class, they're working so hard that their labor produces surplus that comes out as profits for their bosses and supports landlords.
Wow. Okay.
They're working extra hard.
They're working extra hard. Okay. We have a lot to learn. We definitely have a lot to learn.
I thought we had it figured out. I thought that we came to it right there and that was it. Blammo.
I think we want to respect your time but we also I really would like to hear from you your ideal imagining, because like I said, we're very excited about that there are people in your time who are imagining this, and those are the folks who are doing the work. We'd like to hear your imagining of what you're hoping is going to happen in the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and the next 100 years, as you transition into a world where there is no property and landlords and rent. I shouldn't have said that because I don't want to mess with the space-time continuum, but you understand. What is your ideal future? Just what are you all working towards, and do you have a plan of like, we want to get here? Where is it that you're trying to head in your future, which we're from?
Okay, well, I guess to put it simply and broadly, the ultimate goal and desire that I have is for everyone to be able to have all of their needs met, whether it be physiological needs like food, shelter, water, clothing, the basics, clean air, clean environment, but also their relationship needs met. They're able to have healthy and fulfilling relationships, plenty of community, but furthermore, they have the time and energy to devote to their own self-actualization, the opportunity to reach their fullest and greatest potential. So that's my ultimate goal. And I know that we have a lot of work to get from here to there, but what I'm seeing right now makes me super hopeful. Even in the midst of this crisis, I'm seeing people's political consciousness grow in leaps and bounds, just practically overnight. I'm seeing people come together to offer each other whatever it is that they have. Whatever it is that they have to offer, people are coming together to make sure that their fellow human beings are going to be okay. I'm seeing a lot of concern for, you know, their fellow humans, and while that's not happening with everyone, for some people, fear causes them to react a little differently. What I'm seeing for the most part is making me really hopeful. And I think in the shorter term, while we're all concerned, and I think legitimately concerned, that this pandemic could give the ruling class an opportunity to take even more power and become even more authoritarian. And while the economy could get worse, that's all a legitimate concern. I also think that people are sort of waking up to this time as a novel opportunity for us to come together and exercise our collective power, and that maybe we could turn the tables, and maybe this is a jumpstart to that new system that we were talking about needing.
In our research, we've researched even the times before yours, and it's over and over again. It's times of hardship that really create the transformation that brings people into a new era.
Yeah.
And I can't say too much because of, you know, the time-space continuum, but if I could reach through the Zoom tubes and pull you to 2688, you'd see that your work is paying off.
Yay. Glad to hear it.
Wow. We are so grateful to have you. You have been an exceedingly excellent guest. You have given us so much information about the year 2020 that we are super excited about. That's what you say, right? Super excited, right?
Stoked.
We've been practicing 2020 English. What'd you say?
Stoked.
Stoked.
Yes, super stoked.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well,
Thank you for the good news. Thank you for being part of my, spark of hope, for real.
Thank you for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're tuning in and you're seeing this before our next episode of The Future Is Now, you will join us in one of your weeks, 7 days, whatever, to talk to us with Michael Fratkin from we're going to be reviewing the Morituri Ranch West, which we'll be talking about what happens how people die in the future, how we deal with death, and the work that they're doing with the resolution care, and also we'll talk a little bit about hospice and how things are going to be different in the future, and how your work has been doing that. So Tiff Laff, thank you, from the Humboldt Tenants. Please visit them on the Facebook, whatever that is, and
it's when you're reading and you fall asleep
and your face goes on your book. I like it. I love when that happens. We do a lot of that here in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tiff, for joining us. We are so happy to have had you.
Thank you, guys.
Will Rufus play a song for get Rufus to play a little music
Rufus,
for us?
play us out, Rufus. We've got the #1 hit from April 23rd, 2020.
2020. Thanks, everybody.
Enjoyed some interesting music.